From the moment the dust first lifted over the rocky hill of Isandlwana, the story of that day refused to stay buried, and what you're about to hear explains why, nearly a century and a half later. Communities across KwaZulu-Natal still gather to honor it, still argue about it, and still draw meaning from it. Stay with this story to the end, because its final turn changes how the whole battle is remembered. And if you value deep, grounded African history told with clarity and respect, subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. In the seconds that follow, the focus tightens on what most people overlook, not just who won or lost, but how a single morning in 1879 shattered the assumption that empire always triumphs through technology alone. This is not only about spears against rifles, but about confidence, miscalculation, and a society that understood its land, its discipline, and its moment better than the world expected. As the sun rose on 22 January 1879, the British camp beneath Isandlwana Hill looked secure, almost routine, with red coats spread out, tents standing neatly. And officers convinced the Zulu army had been scattered days before. What they did not see was movement folding quietly into the landscape, thousands of men advancing with patience rather than haste, shaped by a system that prized coordination and timing over noise and speed. The camp's layout, wide and exposed, assumed no serious threat, and that assumption was the first crack in the foundation. By the time alarms were raised, the battle was already unfolding on Zulu terms, not British ones. The Zulu formation, known as the Horns of the Buffalo, was not improvised in the moment but refined through years of conflict and training, designed to engage, encircle, and overwhelm without relying on superior weapons. While the British line fired volley after volley, the Zulu regiments absorbed losses and kept advancing, splitting into coordinated movements that bent around the enemy's flanks. This was not chaos. It was discipline expressed through motion, and it forced a technologically advanced army to fight a battle it had not prepared for. The real shock was not that the Zulu advanced bravely, but that they advanced intelligently. Numbers alone never tell the truth of Isandlwana, despite how often they are quoted. Yes, the Zulu force was large, but size without unity collapses quickly, and what made the difference here was cohesion. Regiments moved as one, commanded through signals and shared understanding rather than constant orders. On the British side, detachments were spread too thin, communication lagged, and decisions depended on a narrow chain of command that could not adapt quickly enough. The imbalance that mattered was not men against men, but systems against systems. The land itself quietly shaped every decision and every mistake. Isandlwana Hill, the undulating ground, and the tall grass limited visibility and masked movement, turning British firepower into a blunt instrument rather than a decisive edge. Distances that looked manageable on paper became lethal gaps under pressure, and supply lines stretched too far from the heart of the camp. The Zulu army did not fight despite the terrain. It fought through it, using familiarity and patience to let the land do part of the work. Battles are never fought on neutral ground, and Isandlwana proved that with devastating clarity. Leadership during the battle revealed another sharp contrast. Zulu commanders operated with a degree of flexibility that allowed regiments to respond instantly to changing conditions, trusting trained leaders to act without waiting for distant approval. On the British side, authority was concentrated, and hesitation at critical moments cost precious time. Orders conflicted, assumptions went unchallenged, and by the time a clear response formed, the opportunity to regain control had passed. What unfolded was not simply a defeat in arms, but a collapse in decision-making speed. Logistics, often invisible in heroic retellings, played a quiet but decisive role as well. Ammunition distribution within the British camp became slow and uneven under pressure, with soldiers running low just as the engagement intensified. Boxes were difficult to open, routes were unclear, and procedures designed for calm conditions failed under attack. Meanwhile, the Zulu relied less on resupply and more on momentum, understanding that the window of opportunity was narrow and had to be fully used. The battle exposed how small logistical assumptions can unravel entire campaigns. This victory carried deep psychological weight, both for those who fought and for those who heard about it later, and if this perspective is reshaping how you see African history. Subscribe now and stay with the story, because what follows explains why Isandlwana still matters far beyond the battlefield. For the Zulu nation, Isandlwana affirmed discipline, unity, and cultural strength at a time of growing external pressure. For the British Empire, it was a jolt that echoed through military circles and public opinion, challenging the belief that colonial expansion was unstoppable. The shock was not just military, it was ideological. News of the defeat traveled quickly, and reactions in Britain ranged from disbelief to outrage, with urgent questions about leadership, preparedness, and imperial strategy. The loss forced changes in military thinking, from camp security to intelligence gathering, and it reminded policymakers that underestimating local forces carried serious consequences. Yet even as adjustments were made, the deeper lesson was often resisted. That indigenous knowledge and organization could rival, and sometimes surpass, European models of warfare. Isandlwana became a reference point, whether acknowledged openly or not. Over time, myths grew around the battle, some exaggerating Zulu numbers, others downplaying British errors, smoothing the story into something more comfortable for those telling it. But history has a way of resurfacing truths, especially when communities refuse to let their past be simplified. In KwaZulu-Natal, remembrance is not abstract. It is tied to land, lineage, and lived identity. Annual commemorations, cultural gatherings, and educational efforts keep the narrative grounded, resisting both romanticism and erasure. What makes the modern remembrance of Isandlwana powerful is not triumphalism, but balance. The victory is honored without denying the loss of life on all sides, and the focus remains on understanding rather than boasting. Elders, historians, and cultural leaders frame the battle as part of a longer story about resilience, strategy, and self-determination. In this way, memory becomes a tool for dignity rather than division. Isandlwana's influence stretches even further, shaping how future generations learn about conflict, leadership, and identity. In classrooms and discussions, the battle challenges students to question simple narratives of progress and power. It invites deeper thinking about how societies organize themselves, how they respond to threats, and how confidence can become a weakness when it blinds leaders to reality. These lessons feel strikingly relevant in a world still shaped by unequal assumptions. As technology advances and warfare changes form, the core truths exposed at Isandlwana remain familiar. Over-reliance on tools without understanding context still leads to failure, and ignoring local knowledge continues to undermine ambitious plans. The battle stands as a reminder that success depends on adaptability, respect, and preparation grounded in reality rather than reputation. That is why historians keep returning to it, and why communities keep retelling it. Today, across KwaZulu-Natal, the 147-year legacy of Isandlwana is honored not just as a moment of victory, but as a symbol of strategic intelligence and cultural strength that refuse to be dismissed. It is remembered in ceremonies, in stories passed down, and in a renewed insistence that African history be told on its own terms. The hill still stands, silent but heavy with meaning, watching generations reinterpret what happened beneath it. If you've stayed to this point, you now see why Isandlwana is not frozen in the past but alive in the present, shaping identity, scholarship, and pride. And if you want more stories like this that go beyond headlines into the deeper currents of history, subscribe, watch to the end, and join this growing community of viewers who believe these narratives matter.